No.
Pour the water.
No, Dad, it's not a pyramid scheme. It's multi-level marketing. Oh, my God. Hey, you guys need a fifth for pickup tonight?
Gotta climb a tree.
Well, I know way more about ball than these guys. I should be on the show.
You know who does not, clearly has not optimized his morning routine, like this guy that's going super viral on Twitter.
Put me on the show.
In a way to keep the element of competition at a high level, maybe the threat of relegation. Is this something we should consider in American sports?
You guys know how hard it is to sprint in the middle of a city park without getting the police called on you? Pretty hard, especially in Germany. Okay,
that's really alarming. Yeah, in Europe, in America, you can get away with that, but in Europe, there's no way someone's not calling the police on you. Intense exercise in public? What are you doing?
Very confusing. Scott, when was the last time you sprinted full speed?
It was probably about a year and a half ago out here on a football field. So that I was protected there. But I was going to give a little anecdote. During the pandemic, when obviously I was in DC and all of the gyms were closed, the only way I could go and sprint was finding a spot in DC, which, as you know, Nick, having gone to Georgetown, there are zero places to go sprint.
That's correct.
So what I did was I found a side street in and around the White House over by the Red Cross headquarters and was sprinting on a side street. And I did this multiple times. And there was also multiple times in which PD sort of pulled up and was monitoring me because they had no idea what was going on.
This is why
you were a domestic terrorist. Secret Service was just watching you. Yeah, he's sprinting again.
No,
I don't know. Keep an eye on him.
Scott, sprinting by the White House multiple times. You are a sight. You should do a little bit of time for that, I think. Okay.
Talk about adrenaline rush. I was running the fastest I've ever run in my life.
Dude, you know what you should have done? You should have gotten your car after that and spat out a very contrived video about inspiring others for life. All right.
Well, the reason I did this was because I found a railing. You know how you have those railings as you walk up the stairs, the long, elongated stairs, and I needed to do some sort of back exercise. So I was doing the inverse rows off of that as well. So that was why it became my spot.
Well, that's even weirder. That's even scarier to see a guy doing that in public. I'd rather see a psycho sprinting down the side of the White House. All right. So everyone, make sure you optimize your morning routines. Okay. So we're always ready for the show. All right. This is the big thing. And Scott, you were talking about this on Twitter and got a lot of traction, is the fact that St. Francis will move from Division I to Division III. They failed. They played Alabama State in the NCAA tournament and they lost. And now they're dropping to Division III. Scott, you had this comment right here. It's getting almost 40,000 views. What if every NBA team had this kind of pressure to win or be relegated? Would that help the perceived dip in popularity? And this, I found this to be super, super interesting.
I wanted to throw this thought experiment out to see like where the American fans' heads are at. And yes, I pinpointed the NBA in this specific situation just strictly because there does seem to be a perceived drop in popularity or at least viewership. You know, that's why I say perceived, because I don't know if that's true, if that's not true, and I wanted to see where people's heads are at. Secondarily, the basketball team, which is probably their revenue generator, wasn't winning enough to where it was producing enough profit for them to keep the other sports afloat. So it's a decision by the university. Also, people are talking about NIL potentially having created this issue with St. Francis. Let's be frank, even if they were playing in the NIL game and willing to go ahead and push forward with NIL, they would be only able to compete to a certain degree compared to other big time programs in the NIL. At the end of the day, they were looking at dollars and cents. And for the other programs underneath the banner of St. Francis, the other sports programs, they saw even a winning program didn't win enough to generate enough to support the others. So they decided instead of sacrificing all the others for the one, they sacrificed the one for all the others to continue to compete. So I just wanted to pose this question anyway, to see if the American fan was potentially interested in adding an element of competition that doesn't totally exists in the American sports world right now, the threat of relegation. And that doesn't mean that your sport or your team would all of a sudden go and disappear out of thin air. It just means that if you don't win, and if you don't win enough, then there is a chance and a threat for your team to drop down into a lower league, still compete, and still have an opportunity to get back into that higher league. So all I'm saying is there may be a point in which the American systems or sports systems should consider potentially adding that threat in order to keep competition at a super high level. Because I just mentioned the NIL era, right? So we're getting a lot of complaints that it's ruining sort of the team aspect of things, the drive of the players, it's all me focused. What can I get? What, things along that line. And I get the sense that having a relegation sort of system might actually hedge against a lot of that potential, because you look at the NBA, as I mentioned before, and as I posed in this question, it's dipping in competition. People aren't watching it as much, or at least on the surface with the numbers, they're not watching it as much. And I know there are a bunch of different arguments against that they're watching it on different platforms in different ways. But it still stands. The product on the court isn't necessarily as intriguing as it once was, because there's perceived lack of effort on the part of those who are playing.
This is the format in the majority of European sports. You look at like the Bundesliga, the German soccer league, or the Premier League, the English soccer league. They are all connected. So there's Bundesliga 2, down to 3, all the way down to like 6th, 7th league soccer. And theoretically, a program or an organization from the 7th league could work their way all the way up to the Bundesliga, to the top league. I mean, it would take 7 years, but if you win League 7, you go up to 6th, then 5, and so on. And it's very interesting to have all of these connected. Like, we also had this in the German football league. Obviously, it's a lower level of football than something like the NFL, but it really injected an interesting wrinkle into our experience, because every single year we would have a new team in our division who had just won the 2nd league. And oftentimes they would come in and they wouldn't just be like a bottom feeder in the 1st league. If you win the 2nd league, you're making moves. And also it attracted certain types of players who had the desire to help build something, had the desire, okay, I don't want to just go right to the 1st league. Maybe I have the talent and the ability to do that, but I want to be a part of building something where I help a team get promoted to the 1st league. And so there's that, like, moving up. What you talked about also with the NBA is the threat of moving down. Right now, if you get last in the NBA, you get to have a lottery pick. Same with the NFL. If you finish last in the NFL, you get to pick in the top 5 or 10. And so you're rewarded for this. Whereas if you had some sort of relegation system, you would be punished. And that threat, I think, would really eliminate a lot of load management, any sort of thought of tanking, and some of these negative things that we are perceiving to come along with basketball. So it's very interesting, dude. I'm very intrigued by this idea.
People will say like, oh, why would an organization not want to win? So like, why even add the relegation stuff? It's like, true. Yes, there's a benefit in winning and a benefit for owners to try and have their organization win, but there's also not like a threat of them necessarily losing their team unless it's like abysmally bad and they're in a small market and it's been that way for over time and the league wants to move it to a bigger city. Generally, that doesn't mean that you're forced to sell the team. So the owners are like pretty much fine. They will make revenue just because it is the NBA. It is as popular as it is. But I'm trying to infuse some sort of way to change this without affecting the gameplay, right? So if we change the way in which it's approached from a management perspective, I wonder if even when you're relegated, in order to incentivize the guys more, is like, look, if you're in the top tier and you're playing among those people or among those teams and you're and you're winning, you get 100% of the contracts that you have signed. But if you're relegated, you get 75%, right? So you're actually not just playing in the lower rung, you're getting paid less. So it always keeps that incentive to continue to compete, continue to drive and strive for more money. And that doesn't mean that the number itself will be lower. It's just there is a threat if you aren't performing that you lose some of it. So it's always pushing guys to continue forward, and it decreases, as you're saying, the load management, increases effort on defense, and it could change the game as we know it.
Did you ever watch Welcome to Wrexham?
Mm-mm.
You know, this is sports documentary with Ryan Reynolds and the guy from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. They bought this soccer team in England called Wrexham, and they were this abysmal organization, I think in maybe the 4th or 5th, one of the downtrodden, maybe the 3rd league of English soccer. And there's just been, they've now had maybe 3 or so seasons of the show following them being relegated, being promoted, and kind of all the storyline and everything that goes into that. But it's interesting, when you drop to the lower rung, then you have less of a salary cap. So theoretically, any player could play in any league, but okay, you only have X amount for your salary cap. It's going to be tough to buy some of these players or pay some of these players that'll be like, okay, I'm just going to play in the top because there's way more salary cap. And so there still are some random top level talents in some of those lower leagues, but it does create a really interesting dynamic. It's interesting because one of the things that I always hear from Europeans when I talk to them, I say, what do you think of the United States? What do you think of America? What's one of the stereotypes, positive? They say, in the United States, you can go from being the dishwasher to a millionaire, truly rags to riches. And I think that this is true. This is the country where you do have that opportunity. And the relegation promotion system reflects that. It actually, to me, feels very American. You can start off at the bottom and through meritocracy and winning and building your organization, move all the way up to the top, and vice versa. If you're not performing, you will be replaced by somebody who is. So I think that it really aligns with kind of the ethos of the United States to have a relegation and promotion system. Now, the details and intricacies of how that would work league by league, okay, it would be interesting to work out, but I'm kind of a fan of it. So do you think that it would work in the NBA theoretically?
I think it would work in the NBA as it sits right now because they do have, call it a soft cap. Granted, a lot of teams go into the luxury tax and everything like that in order to acquire great players. So that's what I wanted to bring up when you're talking about salary caps and everything like that. I think with MLB, people will make the argument that, oh, okay, if you want to win and remain in the top, all you got to do is just spend money out the door like none other, like the Yankees, like the Dodgers right now. Like they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars to have the best players, and they have multiple of them on their roster.
Is it profitable for them?
Yeah, in the end, it absolutely is, because especially the guys that they have, I mean, they're cream of the crop like type players, and you're going to have international fame because they got now 2 of the best Japanese players on the planet. You're going to get that sort of influx of fandom and everything like that. So it's definitely worth it for them. Going back to that though, is I don't think it works when you have an uncapped roster per year payment plan. I think that's very difficult, and that's when just the richer owners could just pony up more money and continue to be competitive across the board. I think with something like the NBA and the NFL specifically, is like, look, you are set at $280 million. Yeah, that can change year to year, but at the same time, everybody has the same limitation, and it's all incumbent upon finding, exactly as you're speaking to, the merit-based system and the best of the best, and having the better scouts or the better eye, the better coach, or so on and so forth. And it's like, it's more even playing field, even though you're playing within the relegation system, you're able to compete against those people who may have more money because they just can't spend it.
Yeah, I really wonder, because we talk about this often, like just within the people that we know, because we know a lot of people who are kind of NFL cusp of how many players in the United States could probably actually play in the NFL and have NFL level talent. And I have heard this number thrown around that essentially there's probably enough for 1.5 NFLs, like a league and a half. So that there could theoretically, like, you wouldn't do this, you wouldn't have 16 other teams have a 48 team league. Theoretically, there's enough talent in the United States to have 12 to 16 more NFL teams at that talent level. Now, what if we had what's that? You don't think so?
I think so. I think that might.
I think at least 8. Like, you could have at least 8.
Okay, maybe
but that would be so fascinating to watch. Okay, and like the top 2 with this, like, at the bottom tier league, as you're talking about, but the top couple teams are able to play up into the real NFL. Right. I think that would be so entertaining to watch. The stories, which is what like NFL sells more than anything, is the stories. Yeah. Like, that would be huge for them.
So let's call it,
along with acting as another farm league.
Let's call it 8 teams then. Okay, maybe I overshot it. So let's call it 8 teams. We have this, which is, for lack of a better name, NFL 2, and those guys are battling out, and whoever wins that, they play whoever finished last in the real NFL that year. And if they lose that game, then they drop to NFL 2, and that new team comes up into
That
the
would be
NFL.
so cool.
It would be very, very interesting. I think that there's enough talent for. Okay, let's be a little conservative here. Let's say eight teams. How many guys?
Do you have Rogers' number? We should call him.
Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Goodell, we have an idea.
We have an idea to run by you.
Well,
What
think
do you
about like the
Go ahead,
NBA. Okay, the NFL is the only league that doesn't have these, essentially like farm leagues that are connected. Like the MLB has all those,
Right.
the minors that you can work up. The NBA has G League. Well, the NFL doesn't have that. It just has these UFL and other USFL that pop up and die every now and then,
Right.
but nothing like. It's interesting why they don't have that and don't want to promote it underneath their umbrella.
Yeah, I think because the NFL, college football, which
Yeah.
is such a successful separate entity, and it builds up these stars. So like the NFL, free of costs, gets these guys who played in college, who were promoted by the colleges and by the TV networks, and all of a sudden they go to the NFL and they're household names by the time they get to the NFL. A lot of these guys, they can draw crowds, they can draw TV audiences the second in, and it's at no cost to the NFL. So they have a solid system right
How
now.
is that different than baseball, college baseball, and college, basketball?
Well, because those are way less popular. I think it's just way less popular. I think nationally you can have college football superstars.
I also think just the type of sport it is, it's more difficult to be of a certain caliber, an NFL caliber player, than it is to necessarily be like on the cusp of being an MLB roster player, right?
Yeah.
So like there's so many more people in both those sports, NBA or basketball and baseball, that they need to have different levels in order to truly filter out the wheat from the chaff. So like that's I think the reason for it. And I would agree with Nick. And it's like, look, the NFL has been feeding off of just free feeder system for so long. They're not going to want to necessarily invest billions of dollars in order to generate a new feeder system, but they would be interested in putting billions of dollars into new teams that would help the NFL grow. So that's why I think this relegation system and potentially bringing certain teams into the fold as they want to go international and everything along those lines would be interesting. And I wonder if like in the scheduling and everything, you talk about the best team of the lower league playing the worst team of the upper league. I wonder if even throughout the year, so that it's not just that one game that determines a team going up, if there are certain parts of the season where you're actually playing a lower league team and the lower league team is playing an upper league team, so you could have that cross tier system and competition happening.
Right.
And you could give some of your starters a rest if you're an upper league team and you're going to just trounce them, but it's still competition, and it gives those lower league teams an opportunity to compete and show that they are worthy of jumping up into the upper league.
It's almost like when an FBS team plays an FCS team. Like it's part of their regular schedule, and then they go
sort of a
and
tune-up game.
Sort of a tune-up game. They go and they play Georgetown or Yale, kick their ass, and be in Scott Field.
I mean, even in the D1 single A, they have it. I mean, it's like, look, there are pay-to-play games where you got, not to trounce on them. My sister's again gonna hate me for saying this, but like a middling MAC team playing a top-tier Big Ten team, like that happens. Like. And it's natural. And sometimes those middling teams end up actually beating the big teams, and they show that they can compete.
The other interesting aspect of this is we talk about how college football benefits the NFL, or the NFL benefits from everything that goes on in college football. Because the NBA has its G League, which I believe it finances, probably at a loss. How can that be profitable for Frito-Lay? I wanted to say that earlier when Mikey asked about the profitability. And if you haven't seen that movie, that's such a good joke.
What did you say, Nick?
How can that be profitable for Frito-Lay? One of the best lines do you know what that's from?
What? No.
Game Night.
Sorry.
With Jesse Plemons, who's
yeah.
He's the next Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's not a traditional handsome guy, but he can be in every movie, and he's an incredible actor. He's in 40 movies a year.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
all he needs to take to that next level is a heroin addiction, just like Phil.
Oh my God.
What? It made him a better actor.
He was a great actor. And Jesse Plemons started off as the bully in Like Mike. But what I was getting at there is that it'll be interesting to see now with the NIL era, with college players being incentivized to, hey, maybe I'm going to stay in college for another year instead of, getting drafted in the late second round of the NBA draft and playing in the G League and making, I don't know what they make. I mean, it's probably a solid living, but it's nothing compared to being a star, even if it's in college. So maybe I'm going to stay in college for another year, get a big NIL deal. This will benefit college basketball and help create some of these stars. Like, we know the stars in college basketball. In the G League, it is less. It's got a little bit less eyeballs on it, except for Bronny. And so I'm curious to see how this dynamic affects the NBA college basketball relationship. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you can have two different levels of feeders, right, in developmental leagues, even if one of them is not immediately associated with the professional league. So it's not the same sort of argument, but with baseball, there are obviously, like, I don't even know. I think there might be 7 tiers of baseball in the feeder system. I mean, we all know the big 3: AAA, AA, single A, but there are even some below those in order to get up to a roster. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility with basketball to see both the college league and the G League being viable platforms to then springboard into the NBA and use them as feeders. I don't think they would.
Here's the number real quick on what so like for 2024 to 2025 season, NBA is expected to spend $225 million on WNBA, G League, and Basketball Africa League, with a projected $8 million loss. So
wow, only $8 million loss?
Yeah, no, it's not a bad loss.
Basically breaking even. I'm actually surprised. Well, Caitlin Clark's in the WNBA now, and they're kind of taking off. Thank you, Caitlin Clark. All right.
Now, those are all projections, or was that hard?
Yeah, that was for 2024 through 2025 season.
Scott, I know the figure you're referring to, and those are projections, not actual figures. Okay. And that's another really, really good joke for me today. I'm on fire because I did my
2 for 2.
2 for 2. Morning routine has got me on fire. All right, we got to move on from this very interesting conversation. If you guys have any opinion, leave a comment on it. But let's sticking with basketball here, college basketball, and we kind of trashed the Xavier coach the other day for leaving and going to Texas. Well, Xavier has found their new head coach. It is the son of Rick Pitino, Richard Pitino, coming from the New Mexico Lobos to be Xavier's new head coach and sort of fill the void that I forgot the name of the old coach. Scott, do you know his name? Sean Miller. Yeah. The void that Sean Miller left twice at that school. What are your thoughts on this hire?
I think it's the right hire. There's part of me that's frustrated. I know you've been a champion for the Big East for quite some time, and I too love the Big East. I mean, top tier, high level competition, especially over the past decade. So what's frustrating is like seeing coaches see programs in the Big East who are very competitive, like a Xavier, who has been for the past 2, maybe even 3 decades. Seeing it as a launching point into a bigger quote unquote opportunity. Again, we talked about it on last episode. It's hard to fault Sean for jumping to a program such as Texas because we were talking about the money they can toss around.
Yep.
A lot of people have a dollar amount that will really make them do things that they otherwise wouldn't do. And they probably match that for him. So I like this hire for Xavier because I think Pitino obviously has the same sort of gumption, the same sort of knowledge of the game that his father has. And he's shown it to be successful at a, I would say, a very small program in the Lobos. So having him bring that to Xavier and continue on their success, or maybe even build upon it, hopefully, I think is a right move for Xavier. I just hate it for New Mexico.
Yeah, I hate it for New Mexico for sure. And that brings me to this point, which is not exactly the same because here we're talking about players. But the head coach of Norfolk State basically says that mid-majors now in the transfer portal, they are becoming glorified JUCOs. So check this out.
This is now a glorified JUCO. This is like Norfolk State Community College, because it's like when I say that, not because of the people or things like that, but it's just the way it is. JUCO coaches, I have so much more respect for them these days because they have to get a new team every year or every 2 years or something like that, right? Now we got to get a new team every year, every 2. So we basically a glorified JUCO because these kids, until mid-majors, and not just Norfolk State, until mid-majors get the money that high majors have, we're never going to be able to keep kids here, for a long time. I say it's easy to get them, it's harder to retain them. You know, you could get them because there's a lot of kids that want opportunities. A lot of kids want opportunities, but once they get the opportunity and then they blow up, it's harder to retain them because now the big boys are going to come.
These kids that go to smaller schools, mid majors, they go and have a good season, and like he says, blow up. The chances that that school is going to be able to retain them now with the NIL and the transfer portal, and there being no rules of sitting out or anything like that, these guys can just bounce. It's going to be nearly impossible to retain good players, and it's really sad to see what it does to some of these mid-level schools here. I mean, it's a little bit of an extreme example to or comparison to say they're glorified JUCOs, but it is heading that way. These guys are just using these four-year universities as stepping stones. What do you think?
Yeah, but I mean, I think that it's inevitable, and like they're not going to be able to get the money to compete with these guys. And I think the best option is just to lean into that and just to lean into like, okay, we're going to be stepping stones and maximize what we can do with these 1-year guys. And I think if they just kind of lean into that and maximize that aspect, and like they have a fit in the market of college sports.
Yeah,
true.
But they need to be just accept, okay, we're a stepping stone. We need to operate as such.
It's kind of like when we saw colleges or coaches who accepted the one and dones when that became the rule to go to the NBA. And you saw some coaches who were very traditional and really, really resisted that. I went on to recruit guys who were trying to be one and dones. And you saw some others who were like, screw it. All right, this is the reality now, one and dones. And I guess some of these mid-level basketball teams, mid-majors, are going to have to adopt that mentality that we're going to have guys for 1 or 2 years if they're any good. And that's it.
But like also, I think because of this, they're going to be able to get guys that talent-wise that they wouldn't otherwise get, because guys will come in knowing, okay, I can go do that for a year because I'm not locked in.
and get
like,
paid.
I'm fine going down to this mid-level for 1 year to do what I need to do and get out. That otherwise these coaches and these programs would never be able to touch because they wouldn't go, I'm not spending my whole career there. But this way they at least there's a glass half full perspective.
Yeah, there's definitely a flip side to that. That's a great point, Mikey, because there are a lot of guys who, they may be recruited by Duke, right? But they're 8th on the depth chart. Especially even in their class, they may be like the 4th best of their class, and the chances of them, obviously this cuts against my love for competition and people just wanting to go to the best and pushing themselves to do the best. But there are a lot of guys that will probably take the route of, hey, I don't need to go to Duke right now. I can go to Tulane and ball out and get them to the tournament or win the conference championship and show my worth, develop there, play as best I can there. And then all of a sudden I'm going to be attractive to those ACC, the Big East, the top tier teams. And I'm actually going to get a far bigger paycheck if I were to do it that way, as opposed to just jumping in and maybe getting $10,000 a year versus somebody else who may be getting $800,000 a year on my roster at Duke. So there is a developmental like approach to this that could be a positive, but overall I get the sense that this Norfolk State coach is probably hitting the nail on the head. But at the same time, it's not as though Norfolk State, even prior to the NIL era, was a powerhouse that was going to be dominating against Big Ten teams. So I think we need to also like pump the brakes there and realize, okay, it's always kind of been that way. And to Mikey's point earlier about being like, hey, operate as such. You are a mid-major and you can make huge splashes if you do it right and you build a team and you utilize your finite funds in the best way possible. So like, I think you can still do that in the NIL era, but it's all incumbent upon the alumni base and the funds and the way in which they're able to raise those throughout the year in order to be, I guess competitive when you come to it in the season.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Real quick on your point when you're talking about how like kids not just like accepting like, okay, I'm 8th on the depth chart, I'm going to go and compete, work my way up. Like, I think that era of actually giving a fair shot to compete and like go, okay, I'm going to go in here. There's 8 people in this room. I'm going to work my way up. I don't think that's possible anymore. I think you're not getting an honest shot. They have the guys picked that they paid. They're going to give them 1 reps, 2 reps until they get it right. Or else they look stupid. Like, I paid this guy $100,000 and this guy who we didn't pay is outperforming. I look like an idiot. So they're going to do their best to make sure the guys that get paid. So the competition and opportunity for meritocracy within a room or within a program, I think is kind of diminishing. So then I guess that the competition, where you find the competition is now in the market as a whole of NIL transfer portal. So now you look at it, okay, now the competition is just the whole market versus in the room.
Yep.
You're basically competing against you're competing against everybody in the country at other schools, and you're just trying to make a name for yourself, not necessarily within your school, just broadly.
The competition isn't in the room anymore; it's in the portal.
Yeah, that's true. Scott, I just wanted to push back on one thing you said. You said high level basketball, and you mentioned the ACC, and we saw the ACC get trampled in the tournament, aside from one team. So I'm just going to push back a little bit on that. Okay, I'm fine with. All right, moving on.
1 year.
All right, that chapter's closed. Okay.
Okay. No, the only thing I would add is I think one thing that could stem the tide of this chaos and the competition, the proliferation across not just a room, but across the entire sport would be to add contracts to these NIL deals. There should be a lock-in scenario to a lot of these guys, 2 years minimum. So if you're willing, and you can take a discount if you're like, hey, I think I'm good enough to go one and done into the NBA. You can take a discount of that payment so that you're not locked into a 2-year contract, but it's at a lower rate if you go 1 year.
Yeah, I think that this is coming. This is what's coming down the pipe because there's a lot of great stuff to this new era. There's also a lot of bad stuff, a lot of criticisms that people have. And I think that there's going to be some stuff like this coming in. All right, we got to hit on this. Scott, as our resident Midwesterner, we're going to lean heavily on you here for this wrestling story. So this was pretty inspiring. This is the first time we've talked about wrestling on the show. Wyatt Hendrickson from Oklahoma State, who previously wrestled at Air Force for 4 years. I think he got another year of eligibility because of COVID. Defeats Olympic champion Gable Stevenson from Minnesota to win the title. They're calling it the biggest upset in NCAA history. Let's just play this out here.
30 seconds left.
Oh, dude. He's got the one.
Oh,
dude. This takedown's huge, dude. Oh, that's pure will right there to hang on to the one leg.
Like, I got chills, dude. It's so gritty.
Insane, dude. To shoot on an Olympic medalist and get that takedown is insane, especially at that time.
Stevenson had 170 straight matches, I believe.
Yeah.
He was never, very rarely even taken down. And it's so cool seeing, I'm assuming this is his family, Hendrickson's family. Dude. And you look at interviews after he's talking about, I was just watching all this stuff, reading all this stuff about David versus Goliath this whole week. And I just had the mentality that I was going to win. So Scott, walk us through here what we just saw and why this is so special.
I mean, him shooting, he was trying to find, people probably saw at the top, it was like, oh, this is boring. What are they doing? They're just standing there. No, he was like trying to find his in, and he was calculating his moment, and his shot right there, his ability to keep at least one hand on that leg, I mean, was incredible job by Wyatt. And that was one of the coolest takedowns I've seen in quite some time. And obviously it's been some time since I've sat down and watched wrestling, but the fact that this was the first time in quite some time that I got to see an upset like this, I likened it to this is as big of an upset as if Butler on their first or second run in the NCAA tournament back in the 2000s, if Gordon Hayward had made that half court shot against Villanova and won it. That's the level of upset this would have been.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically a buzzer beater, right? When he's getting that takedown right with 40 seconds left, that's basically just a massive buzzer beater against the Goliath of the sport.
Exactly. This was insane. And I mean, I knew I'm just curious about the intricacies of one, if you went to a service academy like the Air Force, how are you able to get an extra year and not go straight into service? How did he get released from that? So that'd be an interesting thing. But at the end of the day, I thought this was such an incredible story of just pure will and determination coming from an athlete who was an absolute underdog. So
yeah, I was really curious about that too. He got selected for the world-class athlete program at Air Force, which allowed him to delay his military service to continue his career. So that's why he got the extra year of eligibility.
Sick. Yeah, absolutely worth it. I mean, now your dude is going to be there's not enough to say about this win. It's just pure will and determination, exactly what we love about sports. The underdog finding a way, and doing it in a sport like wrestling is almost more impressive than, say, basketball, putting a ball in a hoop. Like
Yeah.
this was as pure as it could get.
Because that's such a primal, just one-on-one sport. It's like you can't help but be inspired. I know not that much about wrestling. I got chilled, goosebumps, and teared up when I watched the whole 5-minute video and his interview after. And the president of the United States was there, and he saluted him, and like all of this stuff. He put a flag around his neck, and it was a very, very clearly emotional situation, and so it's cool to see.
This was a movie straight out of the 80s, like
Yes.
that just occurred in real time.
Perfect.
What a
80s.
moment for him. He's going to be chasing that high the rest of his life.
You should probably go do a video in his car now.
Yeah. I'd actually listen to that video from him.
That one's not going to be contrived. All right. Last thing here. Last sport. We got to go to football. All right. And the interesting thing, a few months ago, Stanford football legend Andrew Luck was named as the first GM of the football program. And he was initially like very supportive of Coach Taylor, who they had there, and he's been there for a few years, who has not been very successful, but when he first got there, and even up until like the last couple of weeks, was pretty supportive of him. And then just released this statement the other day that they are going to be firing Coach Taylor and that they're going to be looking for a new head coach. This is interesting to see. He is above the coaching staff, so it's very, very similar to like an NFL GM. He has the ability to fire the coaching staff, chooses the coaching staff. He also handles all the business side of things, a lot of the NIL and everything. And Stanford is a program that, like we know, our brother played there in the heyday in the mid-2010s when they were one of the top 5 teams in the country, very prestigious. They've completely fallen off. And I do like this move of Andrew Luck coming back, a guy who was a part of that and building Stanford football to that national brand that it was for that 8 or 10 years or so. And it's very, very cool to see that in somebody who like bleeds Stanford football. What are your guys' thoughts on this and him getting rid of Coach Taylor?
What does he say here? Attention to Stanford investigations in previous years related to Coach Taylor.
Well, he had a few. There were some complaints about him, about his treatment of women on campus. Multiple complaints. So that kind of resurfaced, I believe, recently, or there was another one or something like that, and so that came into play like very recently.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there was probably just with Andrew coming in, he probably just did a general audit of the program itself. And this was obviously a part of that audit because you can't necessarily erase it from the history of the program and his there while at Stanford. So I imagine that probably was an element to the decision, but I don't think it was the full on deciding factor, because once you couple that with the ineffective coaching and the lack of performance on the field, I think that was just too big for Andrew to ignore. Because Andrew, like, let's be real, the dude knows ball, for as good as he is. So it makes sense. But the one thing that's most interesting about this is I know he says, like, after consideration and everything like that, we need to reset the program. I think what's most interesting here is the fact that he's resetting college ball itself, because he's the first college GM to go ahead and pull the trigger on firing a coach. And to be quite frank, I don't even know if the GMs in the NFL have that capability to fire coaches. Owners only are the ones who do that, obviously with some feedback from GMs, maybe if they have a close relationship. But that's what's so interesting about this is now all of a sudden Andrew is a de facto, call it athletic director of Stanford football specifically, because generally within colleges, the president, athletic director, and board, those in tandem have the ability to fire a football coach or any coach for that matter. So this is what's so interesting is it's not just resetting Stanford football, but he's resetting he's setting a precedent for what could be the new era of college football in the NIL era moving forward.
Yeah, well, I think a person like Andrew Luck is kind of the perfect one to do that. I mean, he has so much credibility, so much name recognition, so much respect in the football world. Obviously, retiring early, feeling like we still had so much to give on the football fields. I'm just kind of surprised that he even considered keeping Coach Taylor, because they've been brutal. They've been brutal for the last 3-5 years, like one of the hardest fall offs of a Division I program in the last 10 years, from being a top tier team to barely being able to win games. And I'm just absolutely shocked that was in consideration.
Yeah, I mean, everything I know about Andrew is he's a consummate professional, and he's also a very at least caring human being. So I don't think he was going to enter into a program and just go scorched earth first before he did his due diligence. So I think that's what was occurring, and he probably personally, within his own mind and his own strategy, wasn't necessarily considering keeping Taylor, but he wanted to, again, do his due diligence to make sure that he was making the absolute correct professional decision in this regard. So I think that's probably why it didn't happen sooner. But going to my earlier point about this being a new era of NIL football and college football and everything like this, I actually think this is a step in the direction of the potential, as I've mentioned before, for football programs specifically breaking off from universities in totality.
Right.
And those football programs functioning very similar to the club leagues of the Olympic developmental programs of soccer and volleyball and so on and so forth. And I think they would just be licensing the name, image, and likeness of the university to continue on that or keep continuity with the brand of, say, an Alabama, of a Ole Miss, of any of the SECs, and then Stanford too. So I think this is just one more step in that direction.
In this world, do you think that then the players that play on the football team would not have to be students at the university, or what? How would that work?
Correct.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
It would no longer be a student athlete situation. It would just be you've been recruited out of high school in the same way that you could go play pro in basketball out of high school. You can do all that. You can skip that step, and I think that would be the next step. And I'm sure there will be, through the licensing agreement and everything, there would be some sort of relationship still there with the school. So if anybody who wanted to be a student could, but it's not a requirement.
How terrible would that be, though? Because think about it. Like, as we're talking about the fandom of college football, one of the things that's so special about it is, like, John, who went to Arizona State in 1985 and who was a student there, he went into these buildings and he had classes in the same way that the quarterback of 2025, well, he goes to that university, he has classes in the same building. I have a connection to this player in some way. That's going to be completely gone in this world. And I think that just dissolves, I said it before, everything special about college football.
And some kids are going to be making some terrible decisions.
Yeah.
No education.
Yeah. Well, I would say, look, I feel you on that desire and want for that to remain the truth. But has it been the truth? Has that been the case for the past 20 years? No. Let's be real. We all know players on our teams, even at higher education universities like Yale or Georgetown, where dudes didn't take advantage of the fact that they were at such prestigious universities, Oregon State as well. Like, guys would take the lowest common denominator route, the easiest route. They wouldn't really put any thought or care into the fact that they needed to develop as a person intellectually either. And it was just focusing on ball. And, like, yes, that is a sad reality, but it exists even in the old version. And I think it was just a lot of people hoping that it was still true to its nature in being like, oh, the student athlete. But I think for quite some time, it's been going, especially with the higher tier programs, it's been going in the direction that's more akin to the NIL era right now, where it's like, hey, I'm here for one thing and it's ball and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. We have been, like, living a farce by pretending that the football players at Alabama for the last 15 years have been student athletes. We all just say it, but we know it's not true.
But there are people on the roster who definitely take that to heart and take the academics seriously.
Yeah, Johnny, Johnny, full string and is never going to see the field. He's not he's on the roster.
Hey, careful.
He's the guy, no, it's different. You know, he's the guy at Georgia who who's not suited up, who stood on the sideline and hit the ref. Right,
but that's why I say in the licensing and agreement, there will be that opportunity for guys who do want to pursue that. There will be an opening for them to do it, but it's not a requirement.
So you're saying only the people who aren't seeing the field will go to class or be required to go to class.
They can, yes.
That's
they
your
can.
Reward. If you become a starter, you don't have to go to class.
All right,
you can opt into the academics is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, wait. Before we move on for this, I have a question kind of about this new GM wave in college sports, especially, like, I think it's going to be an interesting dynamic because I feel like the people who are going to get these GM jobs at colleges are probably going to be people in the NFL who are coming down, maybe like position coaches who are coming down to get, I don't know, some sort of different experience and then bounce back. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic, like, for these college coaches where they have a person above them who's coached at a higher level than them and then it's kind of more dictatorship, kind of like how you're seeing with Andrew Luck, where he just can snip the coach. And I think that the college GMs are going to have a lot more power over programs than NFL GMs will have over teams.
Right?
That's what I was bringing up. That's why this is so interesting, is because Andrew took a step in that direction in making.
Well, imagine a guy like Nick Saban or Jim Harbaugh. I'm not coaching in college anymore, but in the past, those guys have been top dog at their university within the sports program. Nobody in the football program can tell them what the hell to do, and now. So the GMs above them, it's going to be a completely different dynamic. I think a lot of these big time coaches won't stand for that, give up any sort of power that they have over their program.
Yeah, the difference here is they're not getting, call it an assistant who can manage a lot of the operational things or the administrative things in a GM. They're getting a boss for all intents and purposes. And they already have one in the board of the university and the athletic director. So they're adding a third that has more football, call it decision-making power than just administrative power. So it's going to be interesting to see a lot of these coaches challenged from that perspective. But, it may not be the case for all of the programs that bring in a GM. Maybe this is just a special one-off, but at the same time, the precedent has been set. So it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds.
Maybe Stanford football will be returned to its former glory of Jim Harbaugh, because they are just atrocious right now. And I like when Stanford and Notre Dame are both high quality football programs. I think that's good for the United States. I think it's good. I think it's good for football. Let me keep up this facade that it's still student athletes by having me enjoy a good Stanford and a good Notre Dame football program. Maybe Vandy's never going to be good. Northwestern's never going to be good. But those two, all right? Those two. All right.
Cal?
Yeah.
So they have other priorities.
I'm so sick of Berkeley.
Forget it. Scratch it.
Gosh.
Cut it.
No, leave it. Leave it. I want them to know. All right, sticking with football, we got to hit here a couple NFL things, starting off with the most exciting quarterback room in NFL history, perhaps. Perhaps. You got Cutlets, you got Jameis, and you got Russell Wilson. So the New York Giants announced that they signed Russell Wilson. I don't know what his deal was. I think it was $20 million. Was it a 1 year, $20 million?
What's your deal?
What's your deal, man? And so you've got perhaps the most entertaining quarterback room in the NFL. Seems like they're probably not going to be going after a quarterback in the draft after these moves that they've made. Signing 2 veteran quarterbacks in Jameis and Russell. What do you think?
Well, this is where Hard Knocks needs to be.
Well, they were.
And the other thing, you have the corniest quarterback personality in the league in Russell Wilson, and then the most genuine personality I've ever seen in humanity in Jameis Winston. So I'd love to see how they interact together.
Well, I've got the funniest. There's the funniest meme that I saw about this is Jameis when Russ try and do the pregame speech. Because both of those guys are going to be trying to give a speech, and Jameis is going to give a creative one from the heart that's kind of confusing, but it's authentic. And Russ is going to give a corny one that he got off the back of a cereal box that nobody believes. And then you got Cutlets over there. I don't know. So I just
the way this is going to play out is the exact same way the Key and Peele skit of Barack Obama with the translator. Jameis will be the translator of Russell Wilson.
Funny.
That is a great skit. So, I mean, what do you think? You think, obviously, they're posturing here for Russell to be the starter, or at least to create some sort of possible quarterback competition with Jameis, but I don't know.
This doesn't rule out them taking a quarterback in the draft still. I think they have a bunch of chips, obviously, here. And sorry, Tommy Cutlets, but I'm sure you're going to be the one that's on the chopping block just based off of experience and in that room. So it doesn't rule that out. I think what the Giants are doing here, one, they needed in the worst way to have some sort of continuity, level head, vanilla sort of approach based off of the turmoil that they've been experiencing due to decisions that the upper management did this past year. So I think this makes sense. Like, if you want somebody who's level headed and not going to stir the pot too much, and you need to get back on track as an organization, it makes sense to bring in guys that are savvy vets like Jameis for one, morale, and then Russell for continuity and solid gameplay. I thought he was essentially the scapegoat in Pittsburgh and people hating on him. And like Steelers fans get mad about everything and they can't let it go. So if you don't play to a certain degree there, like they're either gonna love you or they're gonna hate you. And it depends on the day. So yeah, typical Yinsler.
No, Scott. I was going to say typical Scott bashing the other AFC North team, bashing the other fan bases. I think I don't know, man. I think this to me, this move kind of screams we're not going to take a quarterback in the draft. So what are they? They're third in the draft. It goes Titans, then Browns, then the Giants, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
To me, this screams they think that Cleveland is going to take Shedeur Sanders. So like Titans going to take Cam Ward, and that the Browns would take Shedeur Sanders, because there was a lot of buzz going off earlier on about New York and Shedeur, and they've signed 2 veteran quarterbacks in the last 10 days now. It feels like, all right, their quarterback room is set. I don't think they're going to take a quarterback.
Well, yeah, I think you got to look at the money though, based off of those signings. I don't think you just have to look at the names. So like, I think the dollar amount that's going to Jameis is $4 million a year. So that's easily backup money. I actually don't know the number off the top of my head with Russell's deal, but that's all dependent upon that. Is like, you got to pay at least someone in your room at this moment in time right now starter money, and that would make sense to go to a Hall of Famer or future Hall of Famer in Russell Wilson. For all intents and purposes, he's gonna be a Hall of Famer.
He's getting a 1 year, $10.5 million guaranteed with like up to $21 million incentives.
Yeah, so that's like a pretty generous starting quarterback on your roster right now. That's why I say it's not out of the realm of possibility that they bring on a cheap rookie.
Sure. I did not realize it was that low, $10 million.
Yeah.
Justin Fields is getting 20 per year. He needs his agent. I mean, Justin Fields was the backup in Pittsburgh, and he goes off to the other New York team. These 2 boys coming from Pittsburgh, both going to New York. They're going to see each other in downtown. It's going to be a little bit awkward after they had the quarterback battle in Pittsburgh. All right. The other big signing that we had this week, Stephon Diggs going to the Patriots on a 3-year, $69 million deal. Mike Vrabel really trying to do. The Patriots might be something. I'm not necessarily so sold on Stephon Diggs. I mean, he was kind of meh last year, like good, but like $70 million
too. So
I know, but I'm usually not a fan of, like, how old is Stephon Diggs? You've got to be pushing 30. I'm not a fan of kind of these big money to older receivers sort of moves.
31.
We'll, it's 31. Thoughts on this?
I think it was an important move by the Patriots to make. I mean, he's the best. He was the best available free agent wide receiver on the market. Okay. Drake May needs weapons to really see if he can go. Mike Vrabel needs weapons to really make the right steps and strides in his first year as the head coach. So this all is tracking and makes sense. Like I think it's a great way to bring in a veteran to help Drake sort of develop as a quarterback in the NFL. And I honestly think this is a great signing because I don't think the Patriots have had a receiver of this caliber since probably Randy Moss. And I know that's blasphemous almost to say that Stephon is in the same league as Randy, but I'm talking about just like name power, anything along those lines. I think it is a good shakeup, and I don't hate the idea of just getting Drake a weapon on offense to see what can happen.
Yeah, you're right. I do like that, having a young quarterback who showed some promise, especially in the back half of last year, to have a veteran wide receiver like this could be the move. I do think that the Patriots might be kind of a surprise next year. Like I wouldn't be shocked if they won 9 or 10 games.
Yeah, neither would I. And I think a lot of it will have to do with just the reinvigoration of what Vrabel knows the Patriots sort of culture to be, or has been over the past 25 years. And I think him coming in and bringing that sort of grittiness and toughness to the organization, or bringing it back, I think is a good thing. Not that Gerard Mayo didn't have that, but we all know Vrabel has the coaching resume. He's got experience, everything. And he's also a psychopath a little bit on the sidelines. So like, yeah, infusing this into the culture of the Patriots might actually be a huge boon for them moving forward.
Big fan of that move. All right, last thing, and I hate to do this. I hate to do it, but I am contractually obligated to bookmark anytime I see some Browns hate on Twitter. So Scott, this is for you, and then I'm going to log off really fast, really quick for the Cleveland Browns. Real ones now. Browns are taking Sanders. Oh, the Browns are taking Carter. The Browns are gonna F this up again. All right, everybody. 30 seconds to respond to
That's it
that.
for me.
That's it for me. I can't hear any rebuttal or defense. Sorry, Scott.
Oh no! You know what? The problem is this is honestly too true. I am very, very concerned about us. Even for as good as he is, I don't think that we should draft Shadur, or if Cam were to fall out of left field into second place, I don't think we should do that. I think what we really need at this point in time is to go for somebody like an Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. I think we need to go for somebody who is dynamic in those respects and not put a whole lot of potential into that. I think we've botched it with the offseason signings of quarterbacks in our dealings there, or releasing some people. But honestly, I think ultimately what would be the best move is to go for somebody like Abdul or Travis Hunter in the second pick, and then go for somebody like a Kirk Cousins. Really angry that we didn't go for the vet in Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers, or couldn't coax him over. But I think Kirk Cousins might be a good grab for us at the quarterback's position.
I would like that for you guys. The thing is, though, the thing about the NFL is, like, even if you make the worst contract in history, like the Deshaun Watson contract, if you draft a quarterback that ends up being a hit and you get 4 years of him or 3 years of him, basically super cheap, you can be fine. You can be fine. So I don't know, man. If you think one of these quarterbacks can actually hit, everybody's saying that both of those guys are kind of, B plus prospects at quarterback. I mean, obviously quarterbacks get overdrafted, and that Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are the actual, like, generational talents.
Yeah.
But you guys need a quarterback.
Yeah. We need a lot of things.
You need a lot.
We need a lot of things.
Well, spend your money on a new indoor stadium.
You know what you need is a great team manager. Someone
Amir
like Aura.
Khan is the cure for the Cleveland Browns' woes. All right, I think that's enough jabbing at the Browns. Good stuff today, everyone. Thank you for watching. It was a good talk about relegation and stuff. That was interesting. I like that. All right, we will see you guys on the next one. Peace.